Start.
Welcome. Today we will cover the fourth foundation of mindfulness, mindfulness of dhamma. And here we are at Vatsoparam International Vipassana Meditation Center. So first of all, I want to start by saying thank you to Ajahn Putta for allowing me to stay here and learn dhamma. Thank you. Okay, so we will explore this final step. We will go through different parts of mindfulness of dhamma, and I will also share my personal experience. And we will keep the focus very simple, very practical, so very beginner friendly as well. Okay. And please remember that although we will cover different aspects here, this is the aspect that we mainly realize, really understand with the practice. So please use this just as a initial guideline and a motivation to practice instead of trying to understand every single thing. Hopefully this will just help you, inspire you to practice more and more. Okay, so let's look at it. The first part of this mindfulness of dhamma. Now dhamma can be translated as mental objects, mental qualities, or even inner universe. That was a very practical translation I heard. And there are a few categories here. So we will start now with the first category. First category is five hindrances, as the Buddha says. These are the five obstacles to meditation. We will firstly cover them, and then I will explain how to utilize it in our meditation practice. So the first one is sensual desire, which includes, of course, the sexual desire and sexuality, but even now remembering that we are in the advanced stages, so this even includes any desire from any senses. So wanting to see beautiful objects or eat very delicious food or having pleasant touches. All of that is sensual desire at this level of practice. Second is aversion. So that feeling of disliking, oh, I don't want that, I don't like this, or this makes me angry. The sense of resistance or anger, that is aversion. Laziness or tiredness. Now I use a simpler translation here as compared to the sloth and torpor because I feel it's simpler. You can even just say sleepiness, and recognizing that, when we feel like, oh, I'm too tired to practice, feeling a little bit sleepy, it is that factor. Then restlessness and worry or anxiety or thinking too much, recognizing this as well, that comes often. And the last one is doubt. We doubt ourselves, we doubt the practice. So these are the five hindrances or obstacles to meditation. Now, how do we utilize this? How do we put this into practice? When we are actually practicing, about to start practice, this is when we become mindful if any of these five hindrances are present or not. And the key is not trying to push away any of the hindrances, but just simply recognizing each moment, is there a hindrance present? Okay. And our job is just to be aware of it, observe it. You can label it that sleepiness, or desire, and just kind of accepting it. Because when we do that, then we are not so affected by it. We almost uh, create a little bit of distance between this hindrance and so-called ourself. And this is what really helps us. And you sometimes even notice that the hindrance just automatically disappears because you become aware of it and you don't try to even push it away. You're just gently observing it. So at some point it might just disappear. But remembering the motivation is not to make it disappear. Our motivation is just to notice, to understand how does this really work. And in that process, it might just disappear. So this is very useful. And this is where you can even do self-analysis yourself, or you can even find a meditation teacher who can actually help you, because I found that this is such an important step in actually maturing our practice. So these are the 5 hindrances. Then 5 aggregates. Again, a very powerful topic. We will just cover it in a basic, simple details. And of course, as your practice matures, you will understand it more and more. So here we realize through each of our experiences, our sense of self, we really start to break it down into body and mind. So this is where the Buddha says the whole of existence basically is just, if we break it down like a scientist, then it comes down to these 5 aggregates. First one is form, physical form, which is, we can also call it body. And then what we call as mind, the Buddha breaks it down into 4 areas. And please note that the definition of mind here is different to typically in the West, what we use of mind as in a very limited thinking mind type of sense. Here, mind includes feelings, perception or identification, our conditioning or volition, and our consciousness. This is what we call as mind. So, in a practical sense, how can we utilize it? So, typically, when we don't have a vipassana meditation practice, we just see everything happening in kind of like a low definition. But as we practice vipassana meditation, we really start to see everything in high definition, like through a microscopic lens. So we really start to break down the whole process of our life experiences by saying, oh, there is a contact. If I see something, for example, so first of all, there is consciousness uh, that there is some object and seeing. Then, according to that, there is automatically some feeling or sensation related to that. And then the mind identifies what it is. That's when the perception comes in to say, oh, there is a monk walking by. And then the mind looks at the conditioning patterns to decide how to react. And conditioning here might be more of a positive one. It might bring me a sense of, devotion or sense of peace. But similarly, if I see somebody that I don't like, then, we go through the same process of consciousness. Then automatically some feeling gets generated, and then some perception, oh, I don't like this person. And then the conditioning is like, oh, let me just avoid this person and go away. So where this practice becomes really powerful is we start to see that whole process of the whole psychology, the whole cognizing of the process. And when we see that, so the idea is not to say, oh, stop disliking somebody or stop being too attached to somebody. But when we see the process in high definition, really step by step, then we may find that our attachment slowly falls away, or even the idea of self, so called I or so called you, slowly weakens, and then it slowly starts to disappear. And similarly, with both of these factors, 5 hindrances and 5 aggregates, not only we see that the selfless nature, but also we start to see how impermanent it is. Even the so-called hindrances, which we think, oh, they are so strong, they will stay here forever. But when we are really mindful, it's just amazing how quickly it might disappear. And same thing with the aggregates, there are certain feelings that we are really attached to, for example, or pleasant consciousness, or how we react to unpleasant sensations. It's really interesting when we become mindful, we really see, oh wow, this just passes away so quickly. So without having to follow everything or really cutting everything off in very hardly, this is the Buddha's middle way, that we just observe it and then we see the impermanent nature of it. It's like, oh, I did not even have to do anything. Especially if it's unskillful, unwholesome, then this is what we do. And we just say, oh, it just falls away on its own without us having to blindly follow it. So, yeah, this is the power of the practice. Now, let's move on to the third one, the 6 sense spheres. So, now really we are getting into the depth of all of our life experiences, the whole mind body process, how it works. So, if you try to take the attitude of a curious student, like a curious scientist, that you just want to know the whole process of cognition, let's say. So here we go through our six sense doors and corresponding sense objects. What I mean by that? So eyes and visible form, ear and sound. So instead of just saying that, oh, look at this beautiful mountain or this beautiful woman, I start to break it down. Ah, here is the eyes seeing a pleasant form, or ear and sound. So if I just hear somebody shouting, rather than, with an untrained mind, I would be like, oh, who is that annoying me? But in this step, we really break it down. It's just simply ear, and there is just sound. So there is no liking and disliking, because we really just break it down and just see it under this microscopic lens. Similarly, tongue and flavor. Oh, instead of I just love this, I'll eat it so much. So I say, oh, recognize, oh, there is a pleasant taste. Okay. Same thing with nose and smell. Unpleasant smell or pleasant smell, but just recognizing, oh, okay, this is nose, and this is the unpleasant smell. Similarly, body and tangible objects. So I like to touch, if I'm holding a girlfriend's hand, for example, like, oh, this is pleasant. Or mind and mental objects. So, for example, I'm thinking about unpleasant experience and saying, oh, how I dislike this person, how they are so mean to me. But instead, just breaking it down and being aware of the true reality that, okay, this is just mind, this is a mental object, maybe it's unpleasant or pleasant. This is where it becomes really, really powerful in the meditation practice, or even outside the meditation practice, when we really break it down into the whole mind body process. So, just taking a very objective approach, this is what really leads us to seeing the reality as it is without our conditioning. Because as our practice develops here, you will actually start to notice that with each of these contact, there will be your conditioning, the fetter, the defilements that will actually come into play. You will start to see, here is my eye, so this is my craving really coming into play. Or unpleasant sound, oh, this is really my aversion. Or sometimes we just forget to be mindful and realize, this is really mind and mental object. Oh, maybe this is my delusion or foolishness. So this is where we really start to be aware of each. So we really have this open awareness rather than trying to, keep it limited to some small object. This is really how we can apply it in our daily life in doing everything. To say, okay, these are all six senses. Mind, of course, the sixth sense here. That, this is the process of consciousness or cognition that works through all six sense doors. And yes, this is where it becomes really powerful. But again, I invite you to be patient. If you're a beginner, please don't expect to see all of that very clearly in high definition. I mean, ideally we all want that. I wanted to be enlightened on the first day I started practicing Vipassana meditation. But we really understand that this is about really patience and persistence, which is something we will cover in future. So these are the six sense spheres, and being aware of corresponding conditioning or fetters that are correlated to it. Then we come to 7 factors of awakening. For me, this was a very exciting part. I'm like, oh wow, the Buddha actually clearly says there is no secret how to be enlightened or what qualities you need to develop to be enlightened. He actually, lists all of the all of the 7 factors that lead to awakening. First one, uh, mindfulness. Hopefully, this is no surprise that we start with mindfulness, we start with awareness, especially what we call right mindfulness, as we covered in the previous videos, having that open awareness, acceptance, not really having expectations or preferences, but just going with an open mind and a level of acceptance. So we start with mindfulness, and then investigation of reality, investigation of dhamma. So we really start to investigate, inquire, what is really happening. Once we have some level of mindfulness established, some level of acceptance established, and we really start to inquire into our experience. Oh, how does this work? Or who is this person? Is there a person? So this wonderful inquiries, I remember in Myanmar, it's Sayadaw Tejanya explaining this really, really well. That when we start with mindfulness and then when we really get into reality, investigating the reality. So if we go back to hindrances, whenever we come across some hindrances, for example, there is sensual desire or sleepiness, first we just become aware, then we just accept, okay, this is how it is, and then we really start to inquire, how is this created? Did I create this? Is there such a thing as I? This process becomes very interesting. And this is what really makes practice kind of exciting and gives us motivation to continue. So I really love this part, investigation of Dhamma, also known as Dhamma Vijaya. Then next one is energy. By energy here, what we mean is again a right effort, kind of a middle path. So we are not saying that try really really hard, you know put in as if you're really on a war, because that again creates more defilements and maybe craving and expectations become too high. Early on in my journey, I was trying too hard, putting too much of energy, and on the other side, sometimes these days, for example, I take it too easily, become too relaxed. So then again, finding that middle path. So bringing in enough energy and not trying too hard. And how to bring energy? Again, I think by creating interest, or sometimes reminding yourself that, why am I practicing? Or what are the benefits I have got so far? How is my life transformed? So sometimes just reflecting on this really gives me energy. And sometimes when I'm really tired, sometimes I reflect upon my teachers, so or how they've walked the journey, my idols. Then that really gives me that energy to continue. And remembering, it's really about patience, endurance. Taking being patient and just always pushing yourself maybe just half a step outside comfort zone. So not always staying in your comfort zone or not trying to go too far too quickly, but just half a step. So this is what you could do with energy. And then what you really start to notice that as you become more mindful, as you start to investigate your experiences, as you put in some energy with interest, and really a joy, really sense of joy comes in. And this was very interesting part for me because when I was new to the Buddha's teachings, initially it seemed so serious, and everything was about dukkha, unhappiness. So I was like, oh, this is a little bit depressing. So I was really surprised to see joy. I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm allowed to be happy. Not only that, the Buddha says that this is actually a factor of awakening which should be cultivated, developed, and nurtured. And also to a degree you will start to see that it just happens. Now with me, I come from a background as very outgoing person. I used to party a lot, organize a lot of events, travel around lots. But one thing I can tell you, so I've experienced a lot of different forms of joys in my life. Having nice girlfriends, good career, doing some social projects, family, friends. I've experienced a lot of joys in my life. But one thing I can tell you, even from my limited experience, that the joy I get from meditation, it is really something beyond all of the six senses. It's really beyond, being with the most wonderful girlfriend. It's really beyond being with wonderful family members. It's beyond traveling in the most amazing place in Norway or Thailand, for example. It's really a deeper level of joy that you start to experience. And sometimes I call it free happiness or free joy, because for all the other type of joys I had to put in, spend money or spend a lot of time. But with this joy, I just sit down, do nothing, and in 5 minutes, mind is quiet, and yeah, it's such deeper sense of joy. So the Indian in me is like, oh, this is good, free happiness. So yes, this is the factor of joy. And as the practice develops more and more, is a really sense of tranquility, a sense of peace that really comes in. And I have noticed it in my experience that sometimes in meditation practice, there are some really beautiful, very joyful sensations, what we call piti in Bali. And they are so enjoyable, especially compared to what I had known before. But then at some point, the mind becomes so still. And although I've only experienced it in a limited sense, but it's just like, wow, there's such a deep sense of fulfillment, a sense of deep peace. It's just like, ah. So, yes, that is tranquility. And this is what really leads us to concentration or samadhi. But the translation I like better rather than concentration is stable mind, stability of the mind. And one interesting thing to note on a practical sense that sometimes when we start practicing, we directly try to be very concentrated or develop high level of concentration. And sometimes we get frustrated that, oh, why am I not being able to concentrate? I'm practicing mindfulness for so long. But it's really interesting. It's really a step by step process, as the Buddha points out. So, concentration is not really something that I even have to try to do. So, concentration is more of a result of doing all the other steps, especially the first three steps is really something we can do. Then other things just more or less starts to happen. So for me, this was a really useful thing to realize that yeah, the concentration eventually happens. It's a result, so it's an effect. So what I really do is focus on the causes, on the planting the right seeds of mindfulness, of investigation, of putting in energy, even maybe sometimes bringing a level of joy and lightheartedness to the practice, and that eventually leads us to equanimity. I have very limited experience in this area, but very occasional experience. And you really see that there is no strong preference towards I really like this, I really want this, or I really don't want that. Because most of my life it was really up and down a lot. When good things were happening as to how I wanted, it's feeling really high. And then when things were really not going my way, then really feeling low. So with Vipassana meditation practice, I really start to notice that instead of these big ups and downs of waves, it's really becoming a little bit more equanimous. It's more stable, more peaceful. So yeah, and again, equanimity is not something we really have to try to develop as such, but it's more of a result of our practice, especially focusing on these first three steps. But I definitely notice, especially when I'm finishing a meditation retreat, when I'm into the depth of a meditation retreat, it's a beautiful sense of equanimity. I specifically remember after my first Vipassana retreat, being so surprised that, wow, when I was looking at something very pleasant, it was still just a nice sense of peacefulness. I was not like, yay, I'm so happy. And even something very unpleasant had happened and something quite fearful, and I was very surprised to see. Huh, it was just a very little fluctuation. So there was just a little taste of equanimity. So yeah, these are the 7 factors of enlightenment. And when the practice really matures, when all the other causes are met, then that leads us to us physically experiencing and realizing the Four Noble Truths. We will not go into so much of depth, but at a very basic level, because this is something we realize in our own experience. And there's plenty of literature if you want to just read up about it. But after this practice, eventually we really start to know what is dukkha. Dukkha, is translated as, very basic translation is suffering, but I like more unhappiness or unsatisfactoriness or discontentment. So we really start to see, this is dukkha. We really start to know the condition that leads to this feeling of dukkha. Again, often it's craving, but instead of just knowing it intellectually, we really start to see it physically in our own experience. This was the feeling of unsatisfactoriness, and this is the cause. And then we even see the end of dukkha, the end of unhappiness. And we really see the path leading to the end of unhappiness, to end of suffering, to end of unfulfillment. That is the Noble Eightfold Path. And this is so beautiful that the Buddha does not talk about in some big fancy terms, oh, this is the big magical enlightenment, or this is the permanent happiness or highest unhappiness. He just simply says, know dukkha, know the suffering and the root causes of suffering. And once we meet this with this understanding, that automatically leads us to that state of whatever you want to call it, enlightenment, permanent happiness, highest happiness, or unconditioning. So, yes, this is a beautiful practice. So, my dear friends, I hope this journey has been insightful. Please, let's walk on this journey together. Practice, find a teacher. If you have any questions, please comment here or reach out. And myself and my teachers will be very happy to help. And finally, I wish you all the best on the practice. Let us all be healthy, happy, peaceful, and free from all the unhappiness.